All right, everybody, we're live. Welcome back to Word Balloon. It's the Comic Book Conversation Show. John Suntress here. Happy to welcome Heidi McDonald to Word Balloon. Man, this is our first, I think, on the record conversation, Heidi.
It is.
But we spent many an after hours at Comic Cons and hashing things out. And it's great to see you.
It's great to see you, John. Thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, it's great to be talking to you. And man, I can't wait till we have those days when we can be in person and safely enjoying a adult beverage and closer 3 feet maybe. We can the distance we can work on. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no shaking hands, but we'll wave to each other. Close enough. I understand. And hey, honestly, I love More to Come. The Publishers Weekly podcast that you, Calvin, and no, shame on me. Help me out. What's
Calvin and Kate?
Kate is awesome. Man. Seriously,
Kate Fitzsimons. She has a lesser online profile than Calvin and I, so she's she's a little more obscure, I guess. But of course, she is absolutely integral to More to Come. But thank you for listening.
It's a great show. Seriously, you good cross section points of view. And I think generationally, forgive me, but that I think we're covered. And I'm always like Calvin in particular, being older than us and everything. It's always like, Calvin, it is so awesome that you love comics and you still give a shit about what's going on in comics and everything.
Calvin is one of the one of a kind people in the industry. He is literally the greatest cheerleader, pioneer. He really has done so much for comics and graphic novels behind the scenes, working at Publishers Weekly. Publishers Weekly's coverage. Publishers Weekly is the Bible of the publishing industry, and Calvin has been the driving force of the graphic novel coverage there for 20 plus years. And he is, and I'm just blessed to have had him as a boss and as a colleague. He's just the greatest. He's one of the greats. He is one of the great.
Agreed. No, and honestly, I love when he moderates a panel at shows. And man, Heidi, and obviously we're going to talk about it. It's a different world now, and it's who knows what's going to shake out when things normalize. And I feel for you being in New York, at the heart of the congestion and the virus and everything. I'm in Chicago, and things are about 25% what they are over with you folk. But geez.
Were you, John? Were you at C2E2?
I was last con standing. I keep calling it that.
So was I. And we were all at the last con, and we were joking. I was there with Bridget Alverson and Johanna Draper Carlson, my other podcast, my kind of one-off event podcast, colleagues, and we were joking. Is this the last con? And it was the last con. I mean, it literally was the last con. And we were using the fist bumps or the elbow bumps and joking about it. But I told this. I think I told this story on another streaming. So forgive me, people. I mean, I don't do much anymore, so my stories are becoming much more repetitive. But I was at Sunday morning at the show, and I woke up at 6 a.m., which for me is not very likely. And all of a sudden, I got this bolt from the blue. I kind of realized that Emerald City wasn't going to happen, and this actually might be the last day I was at the con. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to get that photo with Carl Urban I've always wanted.
Oh, good for you! Hey, that's awesome.
My last chance, and I'm so glad I did it. I had the bucket list. Honestly, I have my bucket list. And that was on it. That's one of the last things on my bucket list. Got to do it, and here we are. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Of course, now he's clean shaven, so you can get a picture with Mitch Gerrits and pretty much tell people, yeah, that's Carl Urban to me. Sure,
that's true. Yes.
So, where to begin, Heidi? I mean, my God, how much are you talking to retailers? I've been talking to Chicago retailers, but. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, every store has an individual story of where they are credit-wise prior to the fallout and everything, and getting small business loans and the like. So, yeah, what are you hearing?
So, I mean, I spend as much time as I can talking to retailers. Obviously, that's kind of my beat at the beat. I do have a staff of wonderful writers who cover a lot of different things, and
sure.
It's more than any one human can cover. So, but I'm sort of, along with Joe, I want to give a shout out to Joe Grunenwald, who's our managing editor. And he actually has worked in a comic shop. So he has actual retail experience. So, he's also been covering the story really, really, really well. But yeah, I talked to my locals, I talked to my homies. I've done a podcast. We did for more to come. We talked to Jen King at Space Cadets, who, is an amazing retailer with an incredible, her viewpoint is a little bit different than a lot of people. And obviously Brian Hibbs is, my brother, and he has been in the forefront of the conversation. And he writes a column for The Beat. So I'm seeing what you're seeing and seeing the worry and the distress, but I'm also seeing, we mentioned before we went on the air that Steve Jeppy, the head of Diamond, had done a couple of casts, and a lot of people were very impressed by Jeppy in various ways because that guy is not stupid. He really is a very good businessman. He wouldn't have survived to be where he is.
If he wasn't, sure.
He wasn't, right. And he said shops are very entrepreneurial and they're very creative in their thinking. And we're seeing that. We're absolutely seeing that, and it's not just us, obviously, it's everywhere. I mean, every sure. business around the goddamn world is affected by this. Okay. Yeah. It's a worldwide. So, there's no safe port unless you want to go to New Zealand. So, but we can't.
Apparently. Yeah.
Bring COVID there. So, we're seeing a lot of creativity. We're seeing people who do this for passion get stuck in and try to keep this going.
Agreed. And and I'm glad that the community has really responded as it has, and the efforts by creators to help support the local shops. And certainly, Aftershock is a mutual sponsor of both of ours, and they've they really stress in their copy to me, hey, make sure that you're telling people to talk to their shops and everything and see what can be done. And you're right. I mean, beyond curbside service and some of the other great things they're doing, the shops always were about community, and that's how they've survived. So it's great to see, people reach back and recognize the importance of that. You and I grew up, with record shops and tons of independent bookstores. And thankfully, New York is still, pretty good with that. But I'm sure they're disappearing. Chicago is good, but a lot of my favorite haunts are disappearing and stuff. And again, it's something like this that I think beyond just the habit of enjoying what we enjoy and stuff, it's great for younger people to have a place to hang out and have a positive influence on them that, they're reading and they're understanding literature in a way, So I think, that's an important part of comic shops.
It really is. And the community aspect of it is the strongest aspect of it, of the comics industry. It really is a community. It's a community. I've done a lot of, informal research by talking to people about this, but there's very few other art forms or genres that have this close-knit a community as comics do. And I mean, it really goes from, I guarantee you, and no other business would the distributor be a household name, right? And consumers are questioning the man who owns the biggest distributor. I mean, nobody even knows who Ingram is. Ingram is the world's biggest bookstore distributor. And many, many comic shops order from Ingram. Ingram is a huge, vital part of the entire book industry and comics industry. Now, do you know who owns Ingram, who runs Ingram? Can you name a single person who works at Ingram?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I get it. Absolutely, buddy. No, you're 100% right. And I agree. For people who don't know, I believe it's Comic Shop News. I'm going to look right now to make certain. Comic Book News, pardon me. That if you search for them, that's where you will find these videos that Steve has done. And is it Jeppy or Geppy? Hard.
I believe it's Jeppy. I've always heard it.
All right, fair enough. That's cool. But yeah, I think it's great that he is talking. The blues, coming from the music background and radio that I had, it seems like blues artists are in that touch with their community in a very similar way, where fans can really go up and talk to the artists and stuff like that. So you're right, there are so few.
I think music, some other music genres are the ones that I've heard, and the blues certainly one. I think metal.
Sure, absolutely.
Punk is one where these are very distinct genres, and they're very passionate, and they're very small communities where everybody, the record label owners knows everybody on down. So So.
Okay. I see a good question from Gabe Hernandez. I want to address it. You had a recent article on crowdfunding. It was very focused on Kickstarter, which has run into business trouble. Why no mention of IndieGoGo, which seems to have avoided the same trouble as Kickstarter? And it is interesting how they are surviving and
It is. However, I think that, IndieGoGo is actually known for their finances aren't as transparent as Kickstarter. Kickstarter has always been, you can go right on their website and go down. They have a whole statistics thing. They're very, very transparent about what number of campaigns are funded, what are fail, how much money they raise. They have a lot of statistics. They're very much forward in the community. I would actually say with IndieGoGo, I don't know who runs IndieGoGo. I've never heard a statement from IndieGoGo. That might be, but I personally haven't heard it. I'm sure there are people who work there, but they are absolutely a platform that people are using. But I just don't think there's the same level of transparency and that Kickstarter has right now. And hey, go with what you want to go with. If you are confident that you're going to get all your money out of IndieGoGo, then go for it. But there's been scams on both platforms. Actually, they're
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're right about that in terms of books promised that don't happen, and I'm sure other projects as well. So I can appreciate that. Back to Jeppy and Diamond. What are your feelings on the Midtown and DCBS getting into the distributing game with DC and everything? And I mean, because Jeppy, I think, obviously at really tough times, did kind of help hold things together. Was communicate. I mean, I've been to Diamond summits. I've seen the back and forth with retailers in Diamond and stuff. But it does seem to me that it is kind of a broken system, and I don't know what you think. And I mean, yeah,
so,
I mean,
the Jeppy did 2 talks, and I think the reason why everybody's talking about them is that there has not been a lot of transparency from Marvel and DC, who are the comics industry leaders. So the Jeppy is really the first big player who's spoken out, that has gone on the record. And so I think that's why we're putting a lot of emphasis on this. So he did one with retailers, and then he did one with publishers. The publishers were Mike Richardson from Dark Horse, Gary Groth from Fantagraphics,
Ross Ritchie, I saw.
Boom, and then Dirk Wood, who's not the publisher, but he's very high creative director.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Steve kind of had a good answer for all these questions. And wait, what was your question again?
My question, and there was a lot to unpack with what I said, but in terms of Diamond being that kind of not quite monopoly, but obviously responsible for so much of distribution, should it change? Should it should there be more players involved?
Okay, so Steve had a good answer for that, and so where I was going with that was when the publisher was like, what did you think when Diamond told you you weren't going to get paid? And they were like, well, it was great. I was like, no, of course it sucked. Right. And so when they asked Steve a similar question, they said, how did you feel when you learned that DC wasn't going to be exclusive? And he was like, well, it's great. What do you think? Well, no, but I like DC. And then he had a good answer. Like, that guy has got good answers for things. And he pointed out that when there was more distributors, the industry was bigger, and he had a smaller piece of the pie, but made smaller. It was a smaller pie, but he had a bigger piece of it, right?
Okay.
Wait. I'm getting it wrong. He had a smaller piece of the pie, but it was a bigger pie. And
right.
He had more money. So when he had monopoly, the amount of money he made was smaller, even though he had the whole pie, because the industry had shrunk.
Sure.
So he's saying, is this a way to expand the industry? If it is, he can make more money ultimately. Okay. And so I think the $64 million, probably more like $64,000 or maybe even $6,400 question is, why was DC so desperate to get out of the gate with these books? Okay. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't have a definite answer to that. But I suspect it has something to do with AT&T. Okay. That does seem to be, but I also know that DC is not exclusive to Diamond anymore. That predates the pandemic, apparently. So they already had some plans along these lines. So all of the publishers in their talks with Jeppy pointed out, Gary Groth was, how did you feel? And he was like, well, luckily my bookstore distributor, W.W. Norton, kept on paying me. So, we're soldiering on through. And then Dirk Wood from IDW said the same thing. It's like, oh, yeah, all of our money from Penguin Random House is coming. We still kept getting paid by them. So, you see the pipeline got this kink in it that was, stopped things up for everybody. So is it our Lunar and UCS a good thing? I don't know, but I don't think they're a bad thing. I really don't think they're a bad thing. I don't.
That was my initial. Again, as I keep saying, I'm a country mouse. You're a city mouse. I am coming for people who are in the industry and kind of understand this stuff better. When I heard it, it seemed, like I said, that it seemed like this was better. I'm glad you point out these other book distributors too, and also the difference of AT&T owning DC and Disney owning Marvel, because I keep quoting John Hickman years ago saying comic books are on the same shelf for different reasons. And I think right now that is very clear. AT&T, you would imagine, is operating like a typical business conglomerate, and every division needs to show a profit every quarter, and so there's a real imperative there. I suspect that while Disney obviously wants to see profits from Marvel, and obviously has been, much like Pixar, Marvel's able to kind of do their own thing, and Disney just kind of oversees it. We don't know what AT&T is doing. I mean, really. And isn't it interesting and sad timing that Dan DiDio isn't there in front of DC? And while Jim is fronting DC, Jim Lee, it's a very quiet fronting as opposed to Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I know Dan. The timing was pretty incredible on this, and I do think Dan would have had a very different forward-facing. Although I understand AT&T does not like it when Dan or Jim speaks out. So, but Dan didn't care really. And I guess that's why he's no longer there. But part of the reason. I see the comments coming up here.
Oh,
so, yeah. Yeah, everybody's got an opinion.
100%, man.
Right. So, we don't, I can play Benoit Blanc, and just guess. One of the lasting things about DC's move is that they're coming out on Tuesdays. They are sticking with Tuesday on sale dates. Now, I do think you can kind of trace the line here in that every other there's been talk because other forms of entertainment come out on Tuesdays, books come out, video games come out, DVDs come out. Why should comics be Wednesday? So I think you see some AT&T, Time Warner influence there. Hey, let's get them all on the same on sale date. It makes it easier because right now, if a DC graphic novel aimed at the kids market and not sold by Diamond, not very much, not as much as it is through Penguin Random House,
sure.
Comes out. It has to come out on the Wednesday at the comic shop, and then it can't come out until the following Tuesday. So that is a little bit of a problem. And I'm sure you get press releases all the time, on sale in comic shops on 5/1, on sale everywhere else on 5/6. So I think they wanted to kind of unite those on sale dates.
Sure.
So we can see that. But, as for Marvel and Disney, I'll turn this around to you. I'm just baffled. It's like we saw these outcries every time DC said, oh, we might do something digital. And it was like, no. And then like Marvel says, hey, yeah, we're just going to put out these comics digitally. And then it's like, oh, okay. Hey, what's for lunch?
That's interesting. Oh, you think that was the fan reaction in terms of that?
I think fans were upset because they don't like it when that happens, but retailers have been silent.
Well, I guess again in both cases, the books that DC released early and stuff, they were obviously things that were sitting in the warehouse, in those initial releases. And it's funny, I didn't even know. I talked to Matthew Rosenberg the other night. Didn't know that Hawkeye was number 5 was only going to come out digitally until he said it. Then I went to your site and read more, and I'm like, oh, that's very interesting. And again, it seems like they're the low sellers, and maybe that is why retailers are like, well, they're not, really clicking that much on the pull list. It's not going to really hurt me that bad. Mm-hmm. That's just my guess.
Yeah, but everybody's been saying if we go digital, we'll kill comics. And Marvel's like, yeah, we're going digital with this stuff. I'm like, okay.
But yeah, I mean, again, all these companies are facing these weird things of not getting paid, and the whole domino effect of, well, if we're not getting money, should we publish these or whatever? And I mean, as opposed to going digital, it's very interesting as media watchers as we are and everything. And I think all we can do is observe and react. I mean, and yeah, I find it fascinating. I'll say myself, I buy a good amount of digital along with paper comics and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still reading, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, we just don't know. We're gonna have to see. And thankfully, I guess Diamond coming back as quickly as it is. Hope I look forward to talking to retailers and seeing exactly how they're going to progress with social distancing,
right.
The state limitations they might have store by store, and yeah, how everything shakes out. Again, I mean, this is really going to be a long process. One of the reasons why I want to talk to you at this moment and see, what we see in the middle right now. Welcome to the middle of the film.
I look back at this in, a month and say, man, she really blew it. She was so off base on that. Who could have known? Well, Jen King opened her store in Texas. Texas is open for business, and we talked about it. And I mean, it's kind of sobering. I mean, of all the things that I would like to do right now, like just walking into a store and looking at things and touching them, like, I would like to buy, a new hoodie.
Good point.
I will go and touch them and say, I like the fabric on this, and the color. I hold it up, and you can't do that now.
No, that's a good point.
You're kind of not going to be able to do that for a while, I think, and unless we really get serious in the whole country about actual safety and masking and social distancing and disinfection. But anyway, testing.
No, and testing and finally, hopefully, getting a vaccine. I mean, good Lord. This is where I wish, and you may feel the same way, that my grandparents and my older relatives were still around to tell me what polio was like before Jonas Salk and things like that. Because literally, that's what we're looking at. Even worse, though, given the immediate and dramatic effects that COVID has, as opposed to these diseases that you could at least live with for, years or whatever. I mean, still terrible things. Yeah. But, it's just, again, I mean, my God, we really are in this weird place. So what are they doing? What is she doing in Texas in terms of?
We got a whole long list of things, like only a few stores. They can only be at 25% capacity. They do ask people to be masked. Although I think in Texas, you can't really enforce that. And you can't, here's what I was thinking of, is that you can't just sit and riffle through a book, which is another thing. Humans like to touch. We're very touch. It's how we get information about the world. And when you go to a bookstore, nothing is nicer than browsing and looking
100%.
at books and picking up. And you're not allowed to do that in the shop. She said people can't go in and they can't just, pick up the
thumb through
it anymore.
Yeah,
and that really blows. So, this is we're going to figure it out. But John, humans are very adaptable. Like if when we were at C2E2 and flying home, if you told me that in just 2 weeks' time we'd be living in our homes and going to Trader Joe's once a week would be like an episode of The Walking Dead. This is exciting. We become Glenn, and I would not have believed that. And seeing my friends adapt to this, and everyone I know adapt. In my community and my building, my friends, how we've adapted. So humans are adaptable. And, we'll figure it out. And we are going to learn more about this disease also, and how it's spread and what the morbidity and what the danger is. I mean, I posted this on my Instagram, but I have maybe like 12 people here in New York and close by who I consider my best friends. That I see, call each other up, go hang out, have a beer, have a meal, just hang out. And out of those 12 people, 4 of them have it, or had it, and they've all recovered. Yeah. So, and these are, one of them got it super early. One of them got it in the middle, and two of them just got it like 3 weeks ago. And they've all, so it wasn't, and they're careful people. I mean, this wasn't like, like they were out, without masks. These are some of the most careful people that I know. So,
Wow.
this is going to be around, and at some point, we are going to have to take personal risk mitigation as more of it. So, I mean, I think there's the micro and the macro and the personal and the public.
Agreed. No, I hear you, buddy. And yeah, the closest I've come to any people I know that have it are, sadly, I've got some students. I'm teaching for another week at Columbia College here in Chicago, and one of my students was telling me that four family members got it, and a couple passed away.
Oh no! Yeah.
Wow. The worst. I mean, and that's why, I don't know how many. I'm sure there are still people out there, even in New York's situation, that are screaming "Free our state." But we got a couple yahoos here in Chicago doing it too, and it's like, the obvious. You got to get a handle on at least containing it before you make these gradual steps. So I get it. And again, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out in stores. Isn't it interesting? Maybe the cover artist is going to be more important than ever because now we can't really browse. So we really are going to have to look literally at face value of a comic and decide whether we want it or not.
I do think that. I do think, digital previews and, sampling also will become more important. I mean, I think that's just, that's why the beat is just, we are plugging along as best. I mean, we've been hit too, as I'm sure advertising was one of the very first things to go into the crapper. So I just got some of my network report today, and I was like, it doesn't even pay my hosting. Literally, does not even pay my hosting. So yeah, it's bad. But we've struggled. I mean, I have some mitigating we're going to have to do. We're probably going to, this is the first time I even said this, but we're going to go back to some of our own crowdfunding efforts with Patreon, and we have other ways that we're looking at, or I'm looking at, and I'm sure the whole industry is. But at the same time, I say so important that we keep on going. It's really important that the industry have accurate, timely information out there. And I see Joe, my managing editor, with a great comment there. So yeah, truth in advertising, I don't know. That is probably not very accurate. Humans are adaptable, but they are not that adaptable.
Well, but again, the nature of the cover is going to change. This will be interesting. But as far as Joe's comment, but I don't know. I mean, again, this is just so weird. I did want to acknowledge some of the other interesting things that are happening in the industry, and it was something that I read. The Comicsgate people getting distribution at Walmart. Am I right about that? One of the imprints that some of the Comicsgaters are.
I think it's wrong to say that Comicsgate got distribution at Walmart.
All right. Yeah. No.
You went to Walmart and said, "Hey, we're with Comicsgate. You want to do that?" I guarantee you that the people at Walmart, Jim Lee told the story of how hard it was for DC Comics to get Batman into Walmart. Now, I mean, there could be some back channel conspiracy theory thing there, but I doubt that it was, hey, let's get some Comicsgate comics in there. So, I mean, it's Betty and Mitchell Breitweiser, and then a guy whose name I can't remember, but he seemed to be the money man with a connection. He's from Arkansas. That's where Walmart's corporate headquarters is. So that's probably what the back channel connection was.
Okay.
That was super duper interesting as well. Obviously in place long, in the works long before COVID-19 hit.
Sure.
But the idea is that they would have these, I think, end cap displays that would display a whole new line of periodical comics for kids. And a lot of the creators are, aligned with this group or that group, and have just, I take you as you come. If you're a jerk and say horrible, bigoted, discriminatory things, I don't like you. Okay.
Yeah.
That's how it is. All right. So,
agreed.
But you know, I mean, oh, somebody follows this person on Twitter, then we, you know, stone them. I'm not that way. You know,
Fair enough.
I
Absolutely.
follow lots of people on Twitter that I forgot I ever followed, and I'm sure some of them are horrible people. And when I see that, I unfollow them. But you know, it's not how I spend my day. Anyway, so I mean, I have a lot to say about it. And so I'll say I set aside whether it's Comicsgate, whether it's, you know, Fortis Gate, or, you know, Frontier Gate, or, you know, Front Gate, North Gate, South Gate, any gate. This idea of distributing unknown characters in comics periodical form for young readers, I just don't think there's any evidence that this will be successful. You know, there seems to be this belief among many people, and I'll see comments on my, I see this guy, you know, these comments on my own thing. That's like, you know, what we've got to do is get comics back on the newsstand. That'll save everything. And, you know, I guess, I mean, you and I, no lie, we're old enough to have seen comics on the newsstand. That's where I first got comics. But then
Absolutely.
I went to the comic shop.
Yep.
And just putting them in front of people, you know, and putting any product in front of people is not enough to guarantee success. You know, this is a very expensive program, I'm sure. Putting in 3,000 direct, you know, display units in Walmart was not cheap. And I've talked to a few people. So they put a huge investment in this, and, you know,
Sure.
believe in it. I'm not saying, you know, you know, good for you. You're believing it. And I think it's probably sincere when they're saying that they're trying to get some entertainment for kids out there,
Sure.
in front of them. But I see no evidence that children will buy periodical comics. You know, they're buying Wimpy Kid, they're buying Dog Man, they're buying Guts, they're buying, I mean, I should look around my apartment and find some more of these books. You know, they're buying Five Worlds, they're buying First Second Comics, they're buying graphic novels, and they don't buy periodicals.
I hear you, buddy. I remember when First Comics back in the 80s, and in fact, Mike Norton was talking about this too. We're in like greeting card companies, and it was this weird distribution deal that First made and stuff. And it's like, okay, they're there. And yeah, as you say, and I'm glad, because that was the one thing that I know, being Country Mouse, I do know that you have to pay to get an end cap at Walmart and stuff. So that is a big investment. It's an interesting business move. I think another interesting business move is certainly Panel Syndicate. And isn't that interesting timing? Not only Brubaker and Marcos Martin with Friday, but also I've been talking to Alex DeCampi. She'll be coming on probably in the next week or so to talk here on Word Balloon about Bad Agenda, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I mean, cool stuff and interesting timing that I'm sure, you know, again, these things were in the works before the pandemic, but, you know, it seems like people are responding, and it's great. Good new comics.
You know, I've said this a million times. I mean, I have been on quite a few podcasts, and, you know, my own podcast, and I say it on every single one, but I'll say it on this one too, just in case anybody hasn't heard me say it yet. I haven't heard one person say, is Webtoons going to survive the pandemic? Is webcomics going to survive the pandemic? It's a given. We know they're going to survive, okay? There's not even a question about it. So, you know, Panel Syndicate has a great model. Guess what? Those books all come out in print. You know, and people, you know, everyone is Zooming right now, okay, or whatever. What this
StreamYard is over here, but you're absolutely right. Everybody's Zooming, absolutely.
We're Skyping, we're doing this. And what is behind every person who is Zooming and Skyping and ZoomYarding? We have a book, okay? Every single person. There was even an article about how news, you know, pundits, you know, when you turn on CNN, Fox, every single one, everyone is sitting there in front of their bookcase. Everyone. Okay? So, you know, I think people like books. They're not, you know, this is it. I mean, I don't know what else I have to say. You know, they didn't put up their iPad behind them for flashing, you know, streaming Panel Syndicate.
Well, but also the guests on all the media and stuff, and certainly you know, this realm and everything, we are readers, and we don't represent the entire population, because I'm sure you've got your friends that aren't big readers and stuff like that. I certainly have mine, And there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. But you're right. I understand that. But in terms of, and it's fun to listen to the creators kind of wrestle with this in terms of, maybe it is a better model to do, digital single issues. I mean, Brubaker really was very eloquent about it and saying, hey, we make decisions beyond those initial monthly issues that we put out, and maybe for the graphic novel we add more pages, we subtract, we tighten up the book, and make it a slightly different product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, as I say, in my crowdfunding, I mean, it is true. Kickstarter has laid off a bunch of people, and however, Kickstarters are doing well. They're still being funded. In fact, there's some comics Kickstarters that have done fantastically. And I mentioned the one from Jeff Lemire and Matt Kent and David Rubin. How could I forget one of my favorite artists? Cosmic Detective. That was funded in like 5 minutes. I mean,
yep.
Literally, like the first hour is funded. And I said, oh, you can buy the digital edition for $10, cheap, nothing. But everyone went for the $40 printed edition. Now, why is that? Why, if people like digital, it's a channel. It's just a channel, that you get things through. And what we surround ourselves with in our homes as decor is very different, or as something precious. I said this too, but like books when I was a kid. I mean, I was a big reader, and yes, not everyone's a reader, but when I was a kid, my books were my friends. I had to have them, my comics. And I mean, I will be. When I was a kid, I went on vacation on a long car trip. I know I'm aging myself, but we'd stop at the drugstore, and I'd go and I'd look in that rack, and I'd buy the Twilight Zone digest. You see, this is how I know, because it was always the digest, right? I did get the periodicals, but the digest was the gold mine because it was so full of stories. And they did all these digests for kids back in the day.
Sure.
Gold Key is like a Walt Disney comics, Lulu. The Twilight Zone, Boris Karloff Presents. Those are the ones I love. They had that, artist by Wally Wood, Esteban Maroto, all these great artists. But and then I would sit there and I would read it once. Then I would read it again. And then I would go back and I would just look at every page, in that car ride, and then I'd set it aside. And then the next day I picked it up again. Right? Right? I mean,
yeah, buddy, I hear you. No, I was the same way. Absolutely.
They still do that with their comics. They still. I see kids. Back in the day when I take the subway, I'd see kids in the subway reading their graphic novels or walking on the street reading them.
I agree. I was going to tell Carlos Huerta, who was asking about your IndieGoGo or your Kickstarter article, not mentioning IndieGoGo. Heidi acknowledged that already, so I would say, Andrew, if you would listen later on and stuff, or go back and then hear the beginning, because Heidi covered that rather than repeat ourselves. Anyway, so like I said, yeah, it's interesting, and I again wonder what's going to happen. You mentioned that kids obviously are reading the graphic novels now, and also it reminds me that I was talking to Scotty Young last night about Bully Wars. Bully Wars didn't do that well as an image comic. But of course, I said, are you going to try and pursue Scholastic and stuff? And isn't it interesting that that's where the new readers are coming from? And I look forward to in 10 years seeing if they still want to read graphic novels as they get older. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's going to be, I think, the interesting thing. Will the readers of Renee Telgemeier and the like, graduate, want to continue to read this stuff? And what will they be reading? Mm-hmm. Again, superheroes have their fans and stuff, sure. But again, I think maybe this will open things up to other kinds of stories because they're already experiencing them now.
We already have it. I mean, I get, I'm still getting I get my galleys from all the regular publishers, and it is there's I mean, I was looking at the spring preview that PW ran, and there's books about musicians and diseases and, a fire in a mine in Ohio and, Kent State and all of these things. And so, the subject matter is incredibly broad, and, they're finding an audience. I mean, these books are finding an audience. Are they finding millions of copies? No, but they're absolutely finding an audience, or they wouldn't be being published, and just growing more and more. I mean, there were more and more. So, and I see we have some of your listeners are questioners about the health of the industry or that kind of thing. And
Sure.
I have an article I'm working on. It's I talked to Kristen McLean at Bookscan earlier this week, or at the end of last week. The days are just not packed, as Calvin and Hobbes might say.
You're right.
And she actually sent me some statistics, and right up until everything went to hell, comics were having an incredible year.
Yeah.
The sales were dynamic. They were in bookstores, they were flying high. And even in comic shops, they were up from last year. So, I hear this comics are dying narrative.
No.
And it's just, there's no objective truth to it. Certain kinds of comics are dying. Yes, like all art forms have a shelf life or an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Records died, and guess what? They're back.
Yeah, vinyl's back. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree with that. Here, I'm going to give another question that Eric Williams had here. All your years in the comics industry, have you ever considered writing comics rather than editing or reporting blogging?
So yes, I've had several offers to do that. I've always had many opportunities. An open door has always been very generously offered to me, and I thought about it. But you know what? It's not what I do. It turns out that it's not what I do. And I have one or two stories that I still have been kicking around. One of them for 20 years. And if I haven't written it in 20 years, it wasn't probably at the top of my list. But who knows? I might not. But I find I think I'm a born editor. I think, which is really, not the best thing to be, really, because it's not the most, you don't get any of the glory. And usually people only notice editors when they're total assholes. So, I guess that's, maybe I'm a producer or something like that. But
Sure.
I like writing. I'm a writer. I would say I'm a writer above all. I still get a kick out of writing down my thoughts. My thoughts, I would just be journaling, except they call it a blog now. And now it's like, oh, I get to write about other, call out everybody.
Well, that's interesting because I know. Yeah, I had to throw Matt up there. Absolutely.
Good one, Matt. That's still haven't solved that one, but right.
Well, yeah. I was going to ask because honestly, ever since I started Word Balloon, I wanted to talk to editors because you guys are the first tastemakers, and you're the ones that kind of go, oh no, that would be an interesting book. We should make that. And like you said, it is like the role of a producer. And it used to drive me crazy because DC wouldn't let me talk to editors. And this is one of my stories that I keep going to. For 10 years, I was telling Will Dennis, there's going to come a time, man, where you're not working there. And when that happens, I expect a conversation. And he'd laugh, and sure enough, it did happen. But no, honestly, man, Joan Hilty and Shelley Bond and Karen and all these people. And
Stuart Moore,
Stuart Moore is fantastic. And I love talking to Stuart. Absolutely.
Yeah, the best.
So now remind people and everything, because honestly, I know you were at DC and Vertigo. What were you overseeing?
So, well, before I went to DC, I was at Disney, where I worked in Disney Adventures magazines doing kids comics for about so this was the digest. So my dream came true. I got to work on the digest for the kids, and anyway, I worked at Disney for 8 years. And then I worked at DC for 3 years. I did kids comics there for a year, and then I went to Vertigo for a couple of years. And it wasn't the best fit. It wasn't the best fit for my personality at that time. And I was really a little, Schadenfreude. I think I was a little ahead of the curve on graphic novels. I was really for that format right away, and I think it was a little too soon for that. So it wasn't quite the best fit. But I got to work with some incredible people. And, I will say this, Karen Berger is an absolute visionary in comics. She's one of the all-time greats. No question about it. And, we're good friends now. And, I did get to do one really great comic book while I was there, which was Why the Last Man. And, I had literally nothing to do with it being so great. But, I got to have my name on it, so that's cool.
That's really cool. What are you talking about? Absolutely. All right, Gabe asked a good question. Once the crisis settles down, do you think the bigger publishers will be more open to broader returnable possibilities?
So it's funny because Steve Jeppy was talking about consignment, maybe like doing more consignment for comics, and I mean, you see all the other publishers doing a lot more returnability, and DC has returnability programs as well. I think Marvel's really the only one that hardly ever does returnability. Like, I think even in this crisis, when everybody else had returnability, they just did like super deep discounts. So
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think you'll see a continuation of returnability. The direct market is unlike any other market, really. I mean, there is nothing else that is direct sales like this, where the retailer is the end consumer of the system, really, and then they have their own market of selling it to their.
That's right.
So more and more comic shops are using distributors like Penguin Random House and Ingram and Norton, and because they get better terms and they're returnable.
Sure.
They can buy these books and they're returnable. So
yeah,
I think for Marvel it's going to be pretty hard because just of the situation they're in. And for DC, I mean, they have it already. I think it will continue to be a very, very, very valuable tool in the arsenal of publishers. But I want to circle back to
please
something that we were talking about, and I have all the evidence in front of me right now where I can kind of put the picture together. But comics are not dying. I mean, graphic novels are bigger than they've ever been. Graphic novels, I haven't heard about the library system, dying yet either. I mean,
go on, and then I'll have a comment.
They're having problems, but it hasn't been at the forefront of anyone's mind, which is kind of interesting to me. Everybody raced to help the comics retailers, whereas, crowdfunding, libraries, web comics are, even indie bookstores weren't quite the first victims, So, however, there's no denying that comics periodicals, especially for the big two, but from other publishers as well, are the hamburger of the direct market. They're the main menu item. And I've written a lot about the twilight of the pamphlet, or the twilight of the period. I won't use any derogatory terms for it. There's two, and I've talked about this for 10 years. There's two doomsday scenarios for the periodical. Ever since Marvel was purchased by Disney and DC became a more important part of,
Warner Brothers
nowadays. Yeah. So, everybody's like, when is Disney or AT&T going to suddenly notice that they're spending all this money on publishing these comics and pull the plug on it, okay? So there's two ways that would go, okay? Like the characters themselves are way too important to the licensing at Marvel, at Disney and Time Warner for them to ever have Batman or Spider-Man go away. These are billion-dollar licensing franchises, so they'll never go away. But maybe they don't want to publish the comics. So the two different doomsday scenarios are they could either go digital first, which we're seeing.
Right, right, at least for now, yeah.
At least for now, we're seeing it. But it's just agreed that if digital was going to kill print comics, it already would have. Every other industry that's been disrupted has already happened in the past 10 years. So it's not going to happen. However, maybe it is like, we're going to do this digitally and then collect it and put out the print collection. That could still happen. I'm not saying that couldn't. So the other doomsday scenario isn't really doomsday scenario, but they could just say, let's license these out. You know what? We don't need to have a staff of 200 people to put out these products that sell 30,000 copies for $4. Let's just license it out to someone and make all the money. Disney has a huge license. Disney has always licensed out its characters. Even now, they don't publish Disney. It's a whole other thing about how they did it. But
the original Disney characters, or even as simple as the Star Wars young, adult and kid comics being published by IDW. So you're right, it's already in place.
Yeah, and I mean, Disney does have Disney Press. They do have They do publish prose books. So they do some graphic novels, comics in-house. They do. But I mean, it's like they very, very happy, comfortable licensing that stuff out. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, AT&T, Time Warner is always, what is Disney doing? How can we do this only not quite as well or effectively? So, that could happen too. Could be like,
sure.
Hey, Chris Ryle, do you want to publish Batman at IDW?
Well, no, honestly, Marty Pasco was telling me this 10 years ago. And then it was kind of a future shot, kind of really. And but now it seems more and more possible and likely, especially given AT&T's divestment of all these publishing arms of Time Warner since they bought it. And it's like, it seems like they don't want to be in the publishing business anymore. And that's fine. So yeah, you're right. That could happen. And again, the characters aren't going to die. And of course they see their value as IPs in television and film and the like. So yeah, no, I agree. I think well, again, or maybe as Rob Salkowitz would likely observe, we'll see a combination of that happening.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it. I mean, Marvel has licensed out its kids' comics to IDW, and to other publishers. And, we're seeing DC try these different things. How much of it is because they just want to do it, or, because somebody's telling them to do it. I'm not quite sure. I want to give DC, departed Dan DiDio a little bit of credit though. And I mean, certainly Dan and I disagreed on a lot of things, but he's also not a stupid man at all. Or no. Sure. And, neither is Jim Lee. And, I think with Black Label, they've had a big success. Those books have done really well. And, aside from the bat penis thing, but, who couldn't let a little thing like that slip out? I mean, it really just anyone. It could happen to anyone, anytime. Wardrobe malfunction. But, all for the days where that was our biggest worry, right?
Amen. Yeah.
But, Black Label, they were like, and, Jim Lee, it is funny. I've been around so long and I've been a Crusader for so long. Now Jim Lee has taken up the something that I've been talking about since Jump, which is, now he calls it ages for stages or stages for ages. I have it the wrong way. But, he has said, perhaps as you age, you should have different kinds of material for each reader. Perhaps there should be young readers material for young readers, then young adult kind of material, and then perhaps some one-off Elseworldsy kind of high-end, shocking stories for the older readers. And it works. It really works. I mean, I'm surprised we haven't seen Marvel do that, because it really is kind of it's not a no-brainer, but it's a proven that it works.
Well, and 20 years ago they were doing it with the Max line, and it is interesting that getting burned a couple times, much like Bat Penis, as Marvel did with the Max line and stuff. Maybe that is why they're gun shy, and of course too, the whole Disney thrust to tweeners and a younger audience initially and stuff. It is interesting. I mean, I don't know. Here, let's see. Jeffrey, I love Black Label. Really the only comics from the big two that I still seek out. Awesome format, a great value. I agree with all of that.
Yeah, and, Jeffrey's an adult. I mean, I hope he doesn't be saying that, and as an adult, you want to read different kinds of things.
And Tim, I hear what you're saying, that the monthly periodicals are a very inexpensive way for Marvel and Disney or Warner Brothers DC to test new ideas for later use. We all know that. That's the given. But we know that as comic book fans, talk to a conglomerate that says, as Heidi said, why do we need to employ 200 people to make a product for so little profit when we can license it like we license everything else? And why should comics be any different than the birthday cards or the bed sheets or whatever you want to put, your likeness on and stuff? So I get it, Tim. We get it. We're not the ones that you have to convince. It really is the big boys.
I do think Tim is, you're not incorrect either. There's something magical about comics. There really is. There's something magical about them, how people respond to them, the creativity that goes into making them. And yeah, it is. It's cheap R&D. Everybody knows that. But some bean counter can't be persuaded of that sometimes. So, that's kind of the danger. I will say, Disney, there we go. Oh, interesting. Slightly Kelly Sue DeConnick, a smaller 12-issue collections Marvel's doing is the name for that format. I haven't seen that, so I guess it's called the smaller 12-issue format. I don't know, Kelly.
And I didn't mean to interrupt your thought by putting Kel's comment up.
No, that's okay. But it's up to you. You should come up with a name for it. You'd be better at doing it. You can get it out there.
Yeah, Kel could probably do it better. Yeah. Absolutely, that's funny.
So, but what I was going to say is that if there's one thing that is going to come back in this world, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean,
oh God, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that survives this pandemic, it will be the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No matter how bad Disney gets, so when they claw their way back, this will be the first thing they put out there will be a Marvel movie.
And in the meantime, I'm sorry, buddy. Please continue because I don't want to.
No. Go ahead. I'll finish.
Well, because on that point too, while we are all locked down, DC Universe I think continues to evolve in a great way. And by the way, I don't know if you got to see it, but Jeff Johns was really kind and let me see the first 5 episodes of Stargirl. Holy shit, is it good? And I think it's the right tone for right now. And I'm looking forward to HBO Max. I mean, this is really kind of, while Marvel absolutely has an audience that is chomping at the bit for new material, and we'll get it on Disney Plus and in the theaters once they all open up. But I really have to say that I think Disney has really kind of stepped up, or rather DC has stepped up and really improved in the last year or so. And I love the Harley Quinn cartoon. I've been talking to Pat Schumacher, the co-creator of it and stuff. These are good shows. These are really, really good shows.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that, on streaming or TV, which TV is streaming now. So, that that is, thank you, Dean. That is really, synonymous now. And absolutely, DC has had a huge success in there. And, Jeff Johns has had absolutely huge influence in that. And, he's been behind, a lot of the success there. I was going to say, though, as great as DC, HBO, Time Warner, AT&T's TV offerings are, their movies are still all over the place.
Trying to figure them out still. Yes, agreed.
Trying to figure it out. Now, they had a huge success with Joker, which shocked the world.
Indeed.
And, nothing was more surprising than that. Although I thought Harley Quinn was 10 times the movie Joker was. But
I have to confess, I still haven't watched it or Bloodshot yet.
It's so
I know.
Good. It's
I will.
Lovable movie. But there you go. So, if you're talking about R&D comics, the Crisis crossover on all these shows. Now, I didn't watch it. I don't watch.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't watch it because I don't watch that much TV. But everybody on my staff who watched it it was all they could talk about.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And, Marv got to be on it. So it sounds like it was incredible. I have no doubts it was incredible. So, we're seeing the comics used as the raw material for the streaming. And, absolutely. But I just think of them, and this is one of the great conspiracy theories or great, unanswered Kremlinology, as I call it. But there is some... Like Warner Brothers just never know how to do it. They hit on something great. Like, hey, this Christopher Nolan guy seems to really have a handle on Batman.
Yeah.
And it's great. And then they're like, hey, well, let's do Batman versus Superman. That sounds like a great idea. And it's not. So.
Well, it's a great idea, but it's a poor execution. And again, they lean. I'm sure you feel the same way. God, we know all the flaws, and we saw them and everything. And but then Aquaman is a very cool looking and fun movie. I was kind of hit and miss on Shazam, but I'm the wrong audience to talk about that. Well,
there's nothing I was looking forward to more this year than Wonder Woman 1984.
God, yes.
It looked amazing. The trailer was the greatest trailer of all time.
And using New Order music, of course, they had us at hello. I understand. It is 1984 when you use New Order. That's fantastic. Kel's got another comment. Big picture, the thing that concerns me most is the dominant genre publishers are now integrated into corporate families, answerable to stockholders. Absolutely. We lose our greatest strength. We've always been innovators because we are cheap and low risk. That is the environment that fosters innovation. When IP has to be protected and approved by 9 governing departments, we're no longer able to do what we're best at. And you and I are nodding at that. That's 100% right.
Absolutely. You nailed it. It. But, my answer to that would be that, well, when you don't innovate, you stagnate. And I think we are seeing that at the big two, I think we saw Hickman come back with his X books, the Hickman verse of that. And that was a great, did really well because he came out and did something new and fresh. It was a big success. We're saying Black Label, am I in love with all the books? No, but hey, it's a great idea and it's working. So you are seeing that stagnation. And, fortunately, we have all these other publishers, certainly Image Comics and, I don't want to leave anybody out, but, Dark Horse and Boom, IDW, Dynamite.
Vault, Aftershock for new ones. Absolutely.
Aftershock, all these new ones, TKO, AWA, all these publishers.
For a second. Yeah.
Back like crazy. Humanoids is doing stuff. So we have, and that's just off the top of my head. Sure.
I'm with you.
Somebody. Titans, they put out a lot of comics.
Titans, good stuff, absolutely. There.
And I think, where did The Walking Dead come from? We haven't had a hit of that.
Where did Bitch Planet come from, Kel?
Where did Bitch Planet come from, right?
Yeah.
Where did the Saga?
Yeah.
It's I wish Brian K. Vaughan could put out a new book every 2 years, but there isn't that. But we have other, Brian K. Vaughns, and we have great creators out there that are, and we haven't talked. Nobody's been talking about Image. Eric Stevenson is going to do a talk on this screencast, and boy, that's when all hell is going to break loose because Image has been in kind of a tough spot with Diamond because Diamond is their bookstore distributor. So where Fanta and IDW and Dark Horse and everybody else was getting money, Image wasn't getting. So that
when is Eric talking? Is he talking this weekend?
I'm not sure. It's not scheduled, but boy, I'll be home for that.
I agree and everything. Look who's another great Kelly Jones popping in. How are you, Kel? We gotta talk soon too.
Yeah.
The Joe Hill imprint doing well for DC. Absolutely, man. So, here's something interesting that Gabe is asking. What are your thoughts on the New Warriors?
Is that a comic from Marvel?
Yes. Is that where Kibblesmith has the safe space and Yeah. I'll be honest, Heidi. I appreciate the intent, but I'll be completely honest, and I feel like it's going to be the Zima of comic book characters.
Yeah, it was poor execution. That wasn't funny, and something you can certainly do. Look, I think most things are open for humor, and we're certainly seeing a lot of black humor these days, getting us through a horrible pandemic that's killed hundreds of thousands of people already, literally hundreds of thousands of people. So, you have to be able to joke at things that are painful. And, but, I don't know. I saw that and I was like, really? I think people joke about themselves. And that is, when you make humor about your own group, that is funnier than, because it's not punching down. I don't think Kibblesmith was punching down, but it was a little tone deaf. And, there's a lot of discussion to be had about these kinds of issues. And, it is what it is. I don't really read periodical comics. So if you're going to ask me about anything that happened in any periodical comic, I'm not going to know.
No problem, buddy.
Yeah. I'm 100% honest about this because I don't want to give you false pretenses, and sometimes I was looking at that, I have wonderful writers who read everything. And I'm like, you know what? You can write about DC. You can write about Marvel. You know way more about it than I do. And I was like, oh, there's a book called Star coming out. What's that? I'm like, I should need to do some reading on my quarantine.
That's all right. And honestly, again, I think between all of you on the beat, yeah, you're covering all aspects. You're doing a hell of a lot better than I am with that stuff. I got to be honest. Johan Wanlu says Eric Stevenson would be a great guest on We're Balloon. Hey, I agree. Somebody tell Eric that, because I've been trying to get it for 10 years at least. And I respect the hell out of him. But for whatever reasons, my requests come back unanswered. So what can I say?
Yeah.
That's all right. I'll talk to his creators and I'll talk to his editors. That's all right. We'll cover it any way we can and everything. Are you okay for time? Because I know you got other stuff coming up.
I do. I have to go. I do have to go, and probably I have another thing, my own podcast. I'll plug it at 4:00.
Please.
A live Zoomcast. I'm just sitting here in my studio all day, drinking some water. Get some coffee next. But we are doing. It's called Comic Beat Insider, and I team up with Jimmy Aquino, another podcast of Comic News Insider. So we just did Comic Beat Insider. And we kind of toss topics back and forth. We kind of do a deep dive, like on some movies. Like we did a deep dive on The Crow last week, which I hadn't seen in so long. Wow, what a great looking, good movie that is. And
oh yeah,
Brandon Lee, incredible, sad and tragic. But anyway,
yeah.
This week we're doing wrestling, so we're talking about the dark side of the ring. I have Ricky Serrano Dennis will be on, and John Hosch and Jimmy and I will be talking about the deepest, darkest heaps of wrestling, some wrestling comics, and kind of, batting that back and forth. So I'm really looking forward to talking about something other than the direct market. No offense to John, this is great. From everybody's great to see everybody out there, and
absolutely
tuned in. Thank you. Really honored you came and to listen to us blab. But I'm looking forward to a new topic.
I understand. I'm gonna give you one more here. I think Eric Williams asked a good question. So far, Black Label's been mostly focused on the DC superheroes. Do you think it will ever explore stories similar to Vertigo's Best, or will those stories be relegated to Image, Boom, etc.?
Well, let's go back and talk about the editor thing. If you read the books that an particular editor puts out, if you eventually get a feeling for what their tastes are, and so on. And, I forget who's running Black Label now. Is it Mark Doyle? Is he running? I
believe that's correct. Yes, that sounds correct.
Right. So, Mark has a great history at Vertigo. I think, all the rumors, the back scuttlebutt that we hear is that, maybe some of the higher ups at AT&T Time Warner don't like necessarily that kind of edgy material. So, it goes in waves. I think, aren't they doing like the Dark JLA again, or they're working on a TV show or the cartoon or a movie or.
Oh yeah, and also I'll tell you a new book, and it's clouded as a Green Lantern, but I think Far Sector is a very interesting book.
Yeah.
And really, I'm glad to see that kind of ambition, and also I think a lot of the young adult stuff, not Black Label, but I do think the young adult stuff has been very ambitious that they've been doing as well lately.
Well, the young adult stuff has been a huge success for DC in all channels. They've been selling in comic shops. They've been selling in bookstores. And I think it was kind of a shock how successful they were for them. And this is, to anyone listening, this has really been my mantra about the comics industry. It's like, we love continuity, but do not live in the past. I run a blog website. I wish I could just get up and blog about Serial and, Gerard Butler, like I did when I first started to do, and it'd be insanely successful, but you can't do that anymore, So, I hear people say, well, Minx didn't work, so we can't do this, or, God love him. One of my former bosses at a major comic book company once was asked, can we do, comics for girls? And he said, well, they tried that in the 70s and it didn't work. I'm like, well, I don't know if you looked around lately, but it's not the 70s. So,
right.
Like these good basic ideas, and they're like, well, we tried it once 50 years ago, and it didn't work. So what's the point, And I'm like, everybody does that, I do it too. Oh, we tried that, it didn't work. You have to keep trying.
Agreed.
Is, Mark Miller once said that it's the time of crisis that the greatest innovations happen. I'm paraphrasing him, and everybody said that. But he had Ray said, when comics are dying is when we'll do the best stuff. Which is true. We are going to see something come out of this that's incredible.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Real fast, Gregory wants to know how people can see or listen to Comic Beat Insider Live. So,
that's a great question. I tweeted about it. If you check my Twitter, Comics Ace at Twitter, I put up a link yesterday, but as soon as I get off here, I'll put up another link on my Twitter. It's on Zoom, and so you register and you go on. It starts at 4:00, and it'll be me, Jimmy, John, and Ricky talking about the fabulous Moolah.
Hilarious. Fantastic. That's awesome. See, Chicago, I got like Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, and those are the, come on, man. Absolutely. My dad used to take me to Miller's Pub. Heidi, next time you're in Chicago, we got to go to Miller's Pub, because that literally was where all the wrestlers hung out. I know. Don't worry, buddy. We'll be traveling again.
You know what? A lot of the things that we love are going to be there waiting for us. I know that. So
absolutely. Seriously, thanks for your time. This was terrific. And it exceeded expectations, as you always do. And I said, great. Thanks for having me on. You got a pretty slick operation here. I'm gonna take some lessons from it, some learning. Hey, absolutely, buddy. Seriously, any information I can help you with, I'm happy to. No, man, we're all in this together. We all have different voices and approach what we do in different ways. I don't have a competitive bone in my body when it comes to this kind of stuff, because truly, I think we're all interesting and have things to talk about. So
we can't replace each other. We really can't. So
all the best, Heidi. Seriously,
right,
stay safe.
John. Thank you. You too. Stay safe, and see ya someday soon, I hope.
You betcha, buddy. Thank you very much. Heidi McDonald, everybody. And thank you all for watching today on Word Balloon, listening later on. Let me see if there's any other questions that I can answer. Probably not. Let's see. But Eric Williams, with retailers often tight with dollars, how do you get them to buy copies and promote for people to discover these great comics so they have a chance to sell themselves? Well, again, you rely on the community and stuff that these stores provide. And I know that people have been reaching to their retailers and asking, hey, I like Spy Comics and I normally buy, Shield. What else should I buy? And the retailer will tell you and stuff. This is the great role that a retailer will play. Since DC has been pushing YA, but with inconsistent results, Lost Carnival was great. Gotham High was awful. They need to figure out a model that repeats. I think that every book, Gabriel, is going to succeed or fail on its own merits. And it's a question of, does it connect with the right audience or not? What you might find lousy about Gotham High, some kids won't give a shit. I mean, that's just the way it is, man. I really think the best answer for that is hand the book to a kid, the intended audience, and see what they think. And thanks, Kelly. And Kelly, I'll be bugging you because I really want to get you on a Word Balloon Live. It would be great to talk to you, man. We haven't talked in a really long time, and of course, always want to hear what you think and everything. So there we go. And then Beth, thanks. It was interesting. Oh, thank you very much, Beth. That's very kind. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to put out good content and keep everybody entertained with what we're doing here, both on the videos and of course on the audio. Some people don't want to be on camera. I was thrilled that Heidi wanted to be on camera. That's terrific and excellent. Oh, and Kelly Jones is saying excellent. Will do. All right, so look for Kelly Jones in the weeks ahead here on Word Balloon to do that. So, hey, thanks, man. Thanks, Eric, for watching and doing this. I wasn't sure what kind of audience I'd get for an afternoon chat. This is when Heidi was available. Thrilled to have her on and get her point of view. And all I can say is I've got more things planned for next week. Looks like Mike Oming will be joining us on Monday night to do a Word Balloon about his Kickstarter, but also his observations and stuff. David, thank you very much. I see somebody saying nice things about me there. David from Vault, that's very kind. And I should get some more Vault creators on as well. And who else? Oh, I'd love to talk to Don McGregor, Gregory. That'd be terrific. I would love to check. Honestly, I want to check in with some of our older creators and make sure they're okay. And I do want to do more stuff with some of the people that we've loved for all these decades and stuff. It would be great to talk to Don. The only time I've ever had Don on was on a great Black Panther panel with him and Christopher Priest, and that was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Tim. Very nice. I appreciate the kind words. Everybody, I'm going to head out and say goodbye for now. I hope to be talking later this afternoon or this evening with Vanita Rogers from Newsarama, getting her point of view on what's going on. But wasn't Heidi terrific? Honestly, I thank her again for joining. And again, all of you, thank you for being on Word Balloon today. Be well, be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.